If you live in Alameda County, homelessness isn't theoretical. It's part of the daily landscape. Encampments along freeways and city streets, rows of RVs. There's constant frustration from housed residents and deep instability for the unhoused. Recently, the federal government announced a sweeping change to homelessness policy, one that could reshape how counties like ours respond. The federal government is seeking to move away from housing first programs and return to a more traditional treatment first or ladder approach to housing assistance. This model is based on the premise that individuals must first demonstrate measurable progress in areas such as addiction recovery and mental health stabilization before becoming eligible for more permanent or supportive housing. Under this framework, housing is treated as an outcome of treatment compliance rather than a starting point, with advancement contingent on meeting defined milestones. Housing First is a homelessness policy that prioritizes placing people into stable, permanent housing as quickly as possible, without requiring sobriety, employment, or treatment as a condition of entry. Supportive services for mental health, substance abuse, and employment are offered voluntarily after housing is secured. The core premise is that housing stability provides the foundation from which individuals are better able to address other challenges. HUD is restructuring how continuum of care funds are allocated. This is the primary federal funding source used by Alameda County for homelessness services. Historically, under Housing First policies, roughly 90% of these funds supported permanent supportive housing, and most funding renewed existing housing placements year after year. Under the new rules, only 30% can be used for long-term housing, and the remaining funds shift toward short-term shelter programs, mandatory treatment, work requirements, and support for camping bans. Supporters of this change say that the policy of Housing First has failed. Critics warn that tens of thousands of people nationwide, including many here in the East Bay, could lose housing. So what does Housing First look like locally? In the East Bay, Housing First shows up as project-based supportive housing, various apartment buildings with rental subsidies, and long-term placements with case management. These programs primarily serve people who have been homeless for years, have disabilities or serious health conditions, and those who cannot realistically stabilize themselves without housing. Organizations like Abode Services and BACS, Bay Area Community Services, administer these programs throughout Alameda County. For many tenants, this housing is not transitional. It's the first stable home they've had in a decade. What does the evidence say about Housing First? Housing First has been studied extensively, and the results are significant, especially in high-cost regions like ours. Number one, in regards to housing stability, Housing First consistently places people into housing at much higher rates than alternatives. Alameda County programs routinely show housing placement rates well above traditional shelter models. And number two, in regards to health outcomes, research shows mixed results on improvements to mental health, addiction, or mortality. Housing is stabilizing, but it is not a cure-all. And number three, its effectiveness in reducing homelessness on a community level. Here's the hard truth. Housing First alone does not reduce homelessness at the regional level in places like the East Bay. Why? Because the housing supply is constrained and rents are extremely high. In markets where rents exceed 1/3 of median income, like much of Alameda County, homelessness escalates regardless of the service model. So what does the pivot to treatment first mean? The new federal approach prioritizes mandatory treatments, sobriety requirements, and employment expectations. In theory, this sounds reasonable. In practice, it creates challenges in the East Bay. Many chronically homeless residents are over 50, have disabling conditions, and are unlikely to meet strict compliance guidelines. If funding shifts away from permanent housing, local providers cannot simply retool programs. California law limits how long short-term programs can serve people. For the East Bay, that means fewer long-term placements and more churn. But we can't forget one of the main core issues here in Alameda County. Every serious study points back to the same conclusion. Homelessness tracks housing costs. The Bay Area has homeless rates 4 to 5 times higher than lower-cost regions. Alameda County rents far exceed what extremely low-income residents can afford. Federal housing vouchers reach roughly 1 in 4 eligible households. No homeless strategy. housing first or treatment first can succeed without addressing housing production, both single-family and multifamily, zoning constraints, and preservation of naturally affordable units. This is where housing policy and real estate realities collide. So the funding attached to each homeless prevention strategy will be debated and tried in court throughout 2026, so keep an eye on it. It will be fascinating. For me, this debate isn't about ideology, it's about outcomes. We can't improve the situation if the right says treatment first only and the left says housing first only. Here in the Bay Area, we need all three things. We need health and behavioral services to help people live more productive lives. We need homes for the homeless that are readily available and sustainable. And finally, if we ignore housing supply, we will continue managing homelessness rather than reducing it. We need more homes at every level to bring the cost of housing down. And in the meantime, we will utilize all of the creative real estate ownership solutions at our disposal in order to stay in the Bay. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of Creative Real Estate Ownership. My name is Josh Silverman. If you want to add to the conversation, please email me here and like and subscribe here. And thanks for joining me and have a terrific 2026.